In the next half hour, we will meet and hear the stories of 5 people whose lives have been touched by the community of Frankfurt. It will be a chronicle of the neighborhood's past, present, and future.
Frankford Avenue was a place to see and be seen.
It was a very normal, nice neighborhood.
Well, everybody was very friendly. And well, we had no television. Many people didn't even have radio. So that we made our own entertainment. Like every Saturday night, at least it get out on the sidewalk and people would play play guitars or whatever little instrument they had, and kids would all dance in the street. It would be just like a big block party, but it would just be the neighbors of your street.
Everybody looked out for one another. Mothers and looked out for the children of other mothers in the neighborhood, in the block. It was more love to me, with much more love between people in those days than today. Oh yes. Yeah, the life was entirely different in those days. Everybody had nothing, so you didn't have to worry about anybody breaking into your home, stealing and robbing and doing that kind of business.
The men used to come out into the alleys and they played cards, or they played checkers, and they drank beer and play games. And you could just walk out and take your hand at any of the games that were going on. There was this camaraderie.
Frankford Avenue, or King's Highway as it was once known, is the main thoroughfare of Frankfurt and has been since before colonial times.
As King's Highway, it was formerly an Indian trail, and it went all the way up to Trenton as a small, not paved trail. They had to make it wider when the horse and wagon traffic became two-way traffic. At the time, Frankford Avenue was a thriving shopping center. There were many places of interest along Frankford Avenue. It was an exciting place to shop. You have to remember that at that time, not many people had cars. If they had a car, they had one car.
The Frankfurt Elevated Line was an ambitious undertaking in city planning and public transportation. Completed in the 1920s, its goal was to unite the center city and the outlying areas in a single transportation route.
Well, it was a new mode of transportation and would be so much faster.
Well, they were all thrilled because nobody could anticipate the thrill of riding up in the air, as they would say, and the speed of it seemed just unbelievable.
But it was something new, and so they had a big celebration.
Its opening was marked with a grand celebration, including a baby parade.
Everybody that participated in the parade was given $1 by the Frankfurt Trust Company so they could start a bank account.
My parents worked on the project together. My mother made me a little yellow suit and had wings for the arms and a little peak hat, and I was a canary bird. And my father built on my express wagon a cage for me to sit in. And it was all painted gold, and I got a prize. It was a $25 prize. Of course, they didn't count on the noise during the sermon in St. Mark's Church and all the other churches along the route of the L.
Frankfurt was renowned for its entertainment. Its vaudeville shows and the theaters were great attractions.
That was beautiful inside.
The theaters at that time were built with very beautiful, ornate architecture.
And on Saturdays, they had children's matinees. Of course, it was only 10 cents to go to the movies for kids at that time. And we would go and enjoy the movie. And outside, there was always a very tall man in a white suit with a high white chef's hat, and he made or sold candy it was in blocks, and he would break it with a hammer, and he was called Candy Andy.
The Circle Theater was around Margaret and Orthodox. The theater that we had up here was just foreign movies. There were several movies in the lower part of Frankfurt, and they were very popular. One of them even had stage shows, I understand.
The one that I remember best was a woodland scene, and the scene opened with a frog sitting on a stump, and the music would play, and he would jump off, and he'd do all kinds of acrobatics on the stage as a frog, and then finally he'd throw off his headdress and stand up and take his bow.
One of the things was to go in the summertime to get cooled off with the air conditioning. Another thing was the news that preceded the main feature.
Right.
People didn't have TVs to see news. So that was a great attraction. Also, the cartoons were a great attraction.
The Roosevelt, that was very nice, and they had an organist. And every program started with an organ recital. And the organ would come up out of the pit, and he would sit there and play. And then it would go down, and then you would see the movie. We lived on Hedge Street above Bridge. In back of my house, there was a cow pasture.
All my life, 84 years.
We lived in this really beautiful house in Frankfurt.
I was 13 years old when I moved here from South Philadelphia. I moved from a two-story home to 1903 Orthodox Street, third floor apartment. It was quite a change.
Sure.
Yes. Like I used to.
I lived here for 5 years before moving my practice. I lived with my sister on Torresdale Avenue, Torresdale and Benner. That's how I became acquainted with Frankfurt.
Quite a few wealthy people at one time. They used to come in horse and carriage, or even if they did have a car, they always had chauffeurs. And in Rehoboth Church, there's a balcony in the sanctuary, and that's where those people sat.
Down the street lived Mr. Bromley of the ribbon and lace mills, and the other mill owners. They all had these big Victorian houses.
And the woman would invite us at Christmas time to her house. And well, we really thought we were something going into this great big house, and with a big, huge fireplace and sitting room, living room, and just everything, and have a maid help serve you the refreshments.
Upstairs, I loved it. I was up on the third floor, which had a balcony, and the balcony in the spring looked over a magnolia tree. I still remember the perfume of the magnolia tree, and feeling like a princess in the upstairs balcony.
We went home for a week. We bragged about this beautiful home. It still is a beautiful home.
I love school. I'd go to school with the worst sore throats because I didn't want to miss a day's school.
I went to the elementary school, Edmonds School. I walked. It was a beautiful, wonderful public school. No thought about a private school.
Right.
And I walked there in the morning, I walked home at night. My only problem was the boys throwing snowballs at me on the way. And then I went to Frankford High.
When I was at Frankford High School, there weren't many black students in Frankford High School. You could count them on one hand or two hands at the most. I believe, in fact, every class I was in Frankford High School, I probably was the only black student in the class.
Well, I went to our Henry School, which is now the Stern School. And from there we went to the Axe, which is now the Boys Club, Henry's Boys Club. Then to Harding School, then from Harding to Frankford High.
My high school. My mother was afraid I wasn't going to get into college. I was very social. And she dragged me out and sent me to a Quaker school, which was too bad. It wasn't as good an education as I had got at Frankford High.
Wanted to be a school teacher, but never had the money to go to college, so that was the end of that.
And I went to Tufts College.
Temple University School of Podiatric Medicine.
Virginia State College for Negroes, all together. I mean, that was the title of the institution, Virginia State College for Negroes.
I got to know an old gentleman named Gus Missionis, and he used to sit down and talk to me. And Gus had been a child worker in the hosiery mills. He was Ukrainian. He went to work at 12, can you believe? 6 days a week, early in the morning until late at night, and he made hosiery.
Sewing mills, clothing factories, industrial factories, aluminum factories.
There were so many mills, all of them humming, that if you got fired or if you had a tiff with your supervisor, she said, you could walk across the street to the mill across the street and you'd get hired. It was that busy.
But if men played an important part in Frankfurt's industry, so did women.
When you're a girl, you have two jobs. And what it was when these women finished work, they went home to clean the blinds, to take care of the children. When the men finished work, they went to the tap room and they'd have a beer.
When I graduated, first job, Sears Roebuck, porter, labor, whatever. I never will forget that. The secretaries, two secretaries, they were amazed that I had enough intelligence to fill out the application without their assistance. When they looked at it, they couldn't believe it. I saw them looking at each other. They took it into the person who was head of the personnel department, Mr. Dietrich. And yes, we've got a black person out here who could fill out the application without their help.
Right.
So I was hired. That's how I got hired. Porter, labor, freight train loader, etc.
Mr. Dobbins would come down the road. He'd say to a worker at the loom, got a match? And if the kid produced a match, he was fired because you weren't supposed to smoke.
The fire started early in the morning. I don't remember why it started, how it started, but they had firemen at every angle and just streams of water pouring into it. It was mostly up in the upper floors and through the roof.
Frankfurt was where the owners of the mills lived. If you were an owner of the mill, you got a big house and you lived in Frankfurt. And only about 6 blocks south, there was a line, a demarcation. That was the railroad. On the other side of the railroad, the workers lived.
For the record, I started at Sears at 33 cents an hour. 1933, I left there 7 years later. 1940, I had moved from 33 cents an hour to 40 cents an hour. I got a penny a year raise 7 years in a row. For being a good employee. I was glad to get it. And out of that money, believe it or not, show you the difference in times. For you young fellows, show you the difference in times. Out of that money, I eventually finished paying off for this home.
As you know, industry has left Frankfurt. It's left Philadelphia. It's left the country. That was no fault of Frankfurt Avenue. That was progress.
When the Japanese struck us December the 7th, 41.
I was in the Army for 3 years.
And I was lucky in the draft. The lottery, I was lucky in that I didn't have to go to military service or anything or go to the draft board until I finished that term where I was teaching in 42. When I finished that, I ran back home here to Philadelphia to get in a war plan to stay ahead of Uncle Sam's call for soldiers. Because I wasn't mad at any Japanese or Germans, anybody else. So I used to say, just leave me alone, and I'll leave you alone.
My brother, all the neighbor boys that I knew, and it was heartbreaking for everyone. And, you know, you waited with bated breath every day to get the mail. And they would send their letters through the APO, wasn't that what it was called? And we'd hear, you know, what was going on with them. And of course, they had to be careful what they were saying and not give too much information.
So I came back here in the summer of 42, worked in Yale and Towns, which was over here in Frankfurt then. Yale and Towns had a big place over here, Yale and Towns making big forklift trucks and all that. Again, I was sweeping the floor, cleaning up the scrap steel, right back where I started at Sears many years ago. I was right back doing the very same thing again. Just try to stay one jump ahead of Uncle Sam, be doing something very important in a war plan, not just sweeping the floor, because they were next in line to be drafted. I'm trying to stay ahead of that drafting business. So eventually I got my certificate as a burner. I left Yale and Towns and went down to Sun Shipyard, Dry Dock Company, Chester, Pennsylvania. Stayed there till the war was over.
I had a friend who worked there. She had originally come from a farming community in Minnesota and was able to get a war job, and she ended up at the Frankfurt Arsenal. We became good friends. She just lived around the corner from where I lived on Orthodox Street. And other than the fact that she worked there, I don't really know anything about it. Mm-hmm. It was very secretive.
Oh, that was a nice salary. I got $22 a week. Everybody talking about you making a lot of money. That's comical.
The only thing I can remember is that at night you could hear them testing some of the, not the artillery, but the shells.
Wow.
You'd hear them shot off one after another.
So the school district was getting kind of short of teachers too. Mm-hmm. And I began to substitute as a teacher. So I worked during the day as a substitute teacher. So 3:30, jumped in my car and drove right fast down to Chester, Sun Shipyard, to go to work at 4:15.
Wow.
4:15 to 12:15 was my shift. The Lord was with me because many nights I drove back on Frankford Avenue. I don't know how I kept my eyes open long enough to miss all those L columns, but I managed to do that. Yeah.
Frankfurt was a very close-knit community. We had many churches of just about any denomination you could think of. We had a couple of Presbyterian churches, United Presbyterian, 3 Methodists, the Episcopal Church, St. Mark's, and 2 Friends meeting houses, one on Orthodox Street and one over on Walm Street, which is a colonial church. It was built way back.
I can recall just one black family on the western side of Frankfurt Avenue.
In the 40s and 50s, there was a significant number of Jewish families living in Frankfurt. Most of them lived on top of their business establishments on Frankfurt Avenue.
There were more black businesses in Frankfurt then, black-owned businesses, than I see today. Holmesburg was one of the places where they went from here to Holmesburg, and they would stay one night in Holmesburg. It was called the Underground Railroad because that was really underground. Dr. Presley, who was a dentist, Dr. Presley probably was the first black person to move west of Frankford Avenue on the other side that we knew of. Now there's plenty of them. Plenty of them expanding north on this side, but not those days.
It's changed in many ways. There's been a change primarily in nationality or continent of origin.
Population-wise, black people moving into this community, I would have to say it has either tripled or quadrupled. So many blacks around Frankfurt now, especially on the west side of Frankfurt Avenue, which was called Northwood. We were told by the black community, you can't get this house. Because we were the first blacks into this area, by the way. And that's all they had to tell my mother, knowing my mother, that she couldn't get this house. I was living then on Orthodox Street. And when they told my mother, you can't get this house, that's all they had to do, tell her she was going to be determined to get it. And that was it.
Very active in the Frankfurt community. I feel like family to these people and to my patients. I've had 3 generations of people come to me. Children, parents, grandparents, great-grandparents. So I'm really a part of this neighborhood. Frankfurt is coming back. Frankfurt pride is coming back. Frankfurt Main Street will thrive again.